Welcome to part two of my presentation. What exactly is happening to our facility? I hear you cry. Well, after being appointed, the trustees had a mandate from the village to sit and discuss my proposals more fully. At that time, Jude Bennett, my partner, owned the leasehold of the Royal Oak in the High Street, and as such, I was obviously involved, given my previous 25 years' experience in business. The Royal Oak was a labour of love for us, because without our intervention, it too would have become another batch of housing some 10 years ago. It seemed to me, as I had clearly stated at the meeting, this could offer a salvage plan for the hall. The Royal Oak had a great deal of unutilised land that could have been converted, at a cost, into a new facility for the village. It had been clear for some 20 years that the village was struggling to support its 5 social outlets. The first of these to go had been the Coach House pub, and now the second was the Memorial Hall. It seemed both intuitive and pragmatic to attempt to combine 2 facilities into one. And given Jude's position with the freeholders, the Pubco as they are laughingly called, an opportunity to consider purchasing the freehold existed. Remember, the hall deed allows for its relocation within the parish, providing it continues to provide the facilities I discussed earlier in part 1. This meant that selling the land and building at the current site of the hall would provide sufficient funding to purchase the freehold and convert the building. It has been mooted that a conflict of interests may have existed in my case. I stated at parish council meetings that I did not own or have any legal interest in the Royal Oak, and this was true. But for the avoidance of doubt, I referred the matter to both my solicitor and the Charities Commission, who understood the ultimate advantage and my motives that this may have conferred for the hall. The land and building of the hall was valued by several agents, a value of around 1.35 million eventually agreed with Cluttons of East Grinstead. At the time the purchase of the Oak was being discussed at approximately £700,000, and the conversion costs quoted around £430,000, leaving approximately £100,000 for costs and capital. The benefits to the new hall would have been the experience and the customer base already pre-existing. At this point, the trustees experienced the first of many issues. On investigation, it was discovered that all the relevant legal paperwork was not available, and only the smallest segment of the land was in fact registered to Dorman's Land at Memorial Hall. It had not apparently been a requirement by law until 1985. The documents were partly recovered from a solicitor, but not the title deeds. After much investigation, it was discovered that a charge across the land had been taken by Lloyds Bank back in the 1960s, and that had not been removed. It took some months to eventually get Lloyds to agree this had been settled many years ago, and more months for them to remove it and provide evidence for this action. The corollary to this, however, was that Lloyds Bank unearthed the missing title deeds, without which we would have had nothing to sell. After the passing of time, and at no small expense on the part of the trustees, the land was registered and the process could now continue. A deal was agreed with the developer. However, after months of negotiation, the developer began to move the goalposts, and the Pubco, realising the situation, began to up the asking price. The pre-planning application was rejected on the basis that the developer would not commit to the conversion. The deal had become untenable, and I rejected the contract or any amendments at this time and recommended to the trustees that we move on. I explained that there would be some costs involved, as there often are with deals of this magnitude, as anyone experienced knows, but sometimes you have to weigh up the best outcome with the least cost. A cost agreement charge exists over the building for this failed attempt, but the amount has yet to be agreed, and these people retain an interest in still being involved. What a degree at the moment is somewhat negotiable. What I will say is that it is not the figure that I have seen quoted on social media, which is simply a maximum figure, and this is more misinformed speculation. The obvious alternative then was to sell sufficient land not for money, but for the price of a new hall, with as much cash as possible in addition to pay costs and leave some for fixtures, fittings, and ultimately capital. A new deal was agreed in line with this thinking that provided a new facility complete with accommodation, a hall, eating area, bar and games room. After a good deal of lengthy negotiations, a pre-planning application at which the Tandridge District Council stated they would be opening to an enabling consent, which is basically allowing the development to fund a new community facility under certain conditions. After showing and largely gaining approval from residents and ex-members alike, a contract has been signed. However, there was still a number of adjustments to be made from both sides, and this was being discussed, but the country was, of course, engulfed in the COVID crisis. Despite a slight relaxation in the summer of last year, this did not afford enough time to get all the relevant parties together, especially since all of the people we had been dealing with were either made redundant or furloughed. Since November, the process has stalled again for all the same reasons. Negotiations will resume and will have to take into account the effects of this delay from the point of view of the developers, and as such, this part of the negotiation will remain outside the public domain at this time, confined by confidentiality and prudence, since any leaks may adversely affect our negotiating position. Of course, had it all gone through in a more timely manner, the community would now have a new but very closed facility. So there's always a silver lining. The whole process has not been without cost, and moreover, personal guarantees have had to be given to lawyers, accountants and other consultants that will be paid once a deal has been completed. In the meantime, a charge has been registered in the event that, for whatever reason, a change of trustees occurs during the process. This charge will, of course, be removed once all costs have been paid. The charge is a consolidated charge and is in the name of a company whose UK office I represent and has nothing to do with any outside sources. I hope this clarifies the current position with regard to the intentions as they currently stand. And I do hope you will join me for part 3.